Hey there, guys. I want to take a quick second to highlight a partner that we've been working with lately, Upgraded Formulas. You can see them at upgradedformulas.com. I have personally been taking their upgraded T formula to support natural testosterone production. I've noticed it after a few months. I've noticed I've had a bit more mental clarity. My rest is a little better, and I'm recovering a bit better from my workouts, which was actually surprising. So I'm able to exercise just a bit more. I love to exercise, so that's a bonus for me. Women can also take this because healthy testosterone levels in women help with fat loss, mental clarity, muscle gain, things like that. And also, the estrogen and testosterone go together hand in hand. If you support one, the other does pretty well as well. So definitely check them out. Also, they do something really great. I want to highlight a hair mineral analysis where you send them a little chunk of your hair and they will let you know if you're deficient in anything or if you have too much of something like heavy metals in your system. So what this does is this is a great thing to help give you data on your health so that you can make decisions. None of this is a miracle cure. All of it is just information to help you make better decisions around your health and supplementation. All right, so really check them out. They're doing some really great quality. They're seeing some huge results, and I believe they're going to have some clinical studies coming out pretty soon. So check them out, upgradedformulas.com. Use the code ADAM10 to get a 10% discount today. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Hopefully you're doing well. Adam here again with the Adam Bro Podcast. I just wanted to share a quick thought before we get into the interview with Mary Roberts. She did such a great job. She's doing some really cool things helping people with food addictions, which I was unaware was a thing. But our conversation, we talk a lot about her story. We talk a lot about how to recognize food addiction, things like that, and how to start working on it. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is she has this method called HALT, and that's an acronym, obviously. And it's are you hungry? Are you anxious or angry? Are you tired? Or are you lonely? And those are some of the things you think about whenever you are trying to eat something you probably shouldn't eat. And that whole thought of examining what you feel like really stuck out to me. And I wanted to share a quick scripture that I think would go well with the thought for today. And it's in 2 Corinthians 13:5. And it says, test yourselves to see if you are in the faith. Examine yourselves. Or do you yourselves not recognize that Christ is in you unless you fail the test? So this scripture right here, Paul's talking about, I like the word examine. Examine yourself. So he's basically talking about taking a step back and looking at yourself, looking at the situation, looking at what I'm doing. Many of us, Christians or not, are coasting through life, being led by emotions, stress, habit, and environment. Honestly, we're just coasting through life and we don't stop and step back and look at ourselves and look at what we're doing and asking questions like, why am I doing this? What am I actually hoping to get out of this? Many of us are just living life. We're not sleeping. We're just handling one emergency from the next instead of stepping back and saying, hey, what do I actually want from my life? And is this how I want to live? So this whole thought of examining is really important when it comes to health and fitness and faith, obviously, because Paul's talking about it here to the Corinthians. So I really want to encourage you today, before we get into the podcast, examine yourself. Examine what you are dealing with. Look at it. Think about it. And if what you see is something you don't like or you're not proud of, accept it and then start working on it. Okay? No judgments, but I really want to encourage you today to have this mindset of stepping back and asking questions of yourself, examining what you're doing and why you're doing it. Why can't you get your hand out of the cookie jar? What is it that you can't, why is it that you can't stop binging on whatever food or, whatever other negative behavior you might be dealing with or just behavior that is not optimal for where you want to be in life. Okay. So let's step back and let's take Paul's words and say, let's examine ourselves to see where we actually are right now. And this is an ongoing process. I really feel like as a believer, you never really get past the point of self examination. You never really get past the point of taking a step back and just saying, bro, what is going on here? Because as much as I love fitness, there are days that I'm just not into it and I don't want to do it. So I have to step back and go, okay, what's actually going on here? Okay, I'm emotionally exhausted. Okay, so maybe I need to take a rest rather than push myself. Or maybe I just need to go get the workout done and not cry about it. You know what I mean? So, but examining ourselves is a big deal. All right. So I hope you enjoy today's episode with Mary. Hopefully it's encouraging to you. And if you are battling with any of the things that we talk about in the episode, please reach out to Mary on her Instagram, or you can reach out to me. Would love to help if we can. Hey guys, welcome back to our episode today. I have a great guest. Her name is Mary Roberts. She is a certified eating disorder peer counselor, nutrition coach, personal trainer, primal health coach, and strength and conditioning coach. Wow, she's got a lot of accolades there. So, one of the great things that I really love about Mary is she's going to share a lot about her story where she battled some eating disorders, battled some food addiction throughout the years, and has gotten to the place where she has really found some relief, deliverance, and just kind of learned how to kick this thing in the behind a little bit. She really changed her health. She changed her, her whole body, everything. So I really resonated with her and her story because she's talking about a topic that I don't understand. So I'm really hoping she can shed some light on food addiction and what people who deal with that are really battling with. So, Mary, thank you so much for being here. I really hope you're having a great day, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So far, so good. And thanks for inviting me.
Of
Um,
course.
I'll just launch into sharing my story, I guess. So
Yep.
I'm 52 years old and I have battled eating disorders since I was a preteen. Bulimia, compulsive eating, and binge eating disorder. And it started as a kid. And I think like I have a kind of a typical story in that, when it comes to people with eating disorders, kind of have a typical story of, I lived in an alcoholic home. So I, grew up around addiction. Food kind of became my comfort and my friend. I started turning to it at an early age. And so, by the time I was a junior in high school, I was full-fledged bulimia, and one of my friends told a school principal, and the school principal told my parents, and the next thing you knew, I was in a women's recovery facility in Redwood City, California, for 6 or 8 weeks. I can't remember how long it was. It was a long time. I was missing school, and that was like my first experience with an eating disorder treatment facility. I stopped like full-time binging and purging after that experience, like for a while, but eventually I returned to binging because the mode of treatment really it didn't work for me. I can talk more about that later, but and so from there until age 42, there's like a big gap between like age 16 and 42. I got married, I got divorced, I had babies, I remarried, all of that stuff, and went up and down with my weight for years, tried everything. Like I was someone who was like a chronic dieter. If there was an infomercial for it and I had money to order it, I was getting it. If there was like a club or a membership or like pre-made food, like like Nutrisystem, Jenny Craig, Slim Fast, Dexatrim, all of the things. I did Richard Simmons Deal a Meal, that like shows my age right there. There was like, I did all the things, always doing all the things. And my weight was either going up or it was going down. I was never like in a state of maintenance or health. And I was like obsessed. And it was like all I thought about, like my entire life, like revolved around what I was eating or not eating, what I weighed, what I wore. Like it ruled everything. And so finally, and then that led to health problems, right? Because I became morbidly obese. I hit a high weight of 260 pounds. I had type 2 diabetes, I had psoriasis, sleep apnea, I snored, I had asthma and allergies. I got sick several times a year. And at age 42, I found myself, I just was like exhausted. I was truly exhausted and I thought, I'm going to die. And my youngest was only like 10 at the time. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to die and I'm going to leave my boys behind. I have 3 boys. And I just felt desperate. And so I did what I always did. I started another diet. I had tried Atkins a couple times because I already knew like I had an issue with carbohydrates as far as like, you know, binging on them. And I just gravitated towards them. And so I thought, okay, well, here, I'm going to give it another shot. The before picture that I always use, you know, I have lots of before pictures, but I use that one the most because that was like my heaviest weight. And when I took that picture, I used my son's camera and I took that picture in the bathroom. And when I looked at the screen, and saw what I looked like I remember I sat on the edge of the tub and I just cried so hard that I had snot bubbles. I think it was bad. Like it was like a turning point for me. And I say that now because that is like the day that started it all, but it wasn't the first time that I had taken a before picture. It wasn't the first time that I'd broken down crying about, you know, my weight. But this was the time that, you know, I finally found something that worked for me. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna do Atkins again. Like I was familiar with that. It was low carb. I knew I needed that. I cut out carbs. And like less than a week in, a friend of mine said to me, "Oh, don't do Atkins, do keto." And I had never heard that word before, didn't know anything about it. And my friend said, "Oh, it's great." He's like, "You can eat bacon and eggs, all the bacon you want. You can eat steak." And I started laughing because in my mind, all I could think about was that is a lot of Weight Watchers points, right? Like there was no, I couldn't even imagine like losing weight, eating what he, you know, said I could eat. But I realized eventually, like he convinced me he was serious. And this was in 2014 and there wasn't a whole lot yet, you know, on the internet about it. But I, you know, found out what I could, and I ended up finding some like low carb, high fat groups on Facebook. And then my friend who told me about it, like he knew about it because his son had epilepsy, and so their whole family was doing it for that reason. But then he started. He's like, let's start a group. So he started a group and we grew it, and then he started a company and all these things like happen. And ultimately what happened was I lost over 100 pounds. I reversed my type 2 diabetes. I got rid of my psoriasis. My asthma and allergies went away. I didn't think that was something that could even happen. Like I carried an inhaler around from the age of 6 to age 42. I got my sleep apnea went away. I stopped snoring, you know, and I lost a lot of weight, and I felt unbelievably better. And there was a lot going on during that time, but I learned a lot. And I remember like going through this angry phase because I had been in and out of like treatment programs. I'd been through lots of like therapists and support groups and 12-step groups. And I even at church, there was I can't remember the name of it now, but there was like some sort of like recovery program. And then I also did Way Down, which was with this, I shouldn't say crazy lady, but she's like, she ended up being a crazy lady, Gwen Shamlin's Way Down workshop. And then I tried this other one, you know, First Place, you know, putting God first place will fix your eating disorder. I did all of those things over the years. And but getting my nutrition right was the only thing that helped me. So anyway, got rid of like all those, you know, health issues and felt really good. And then got really angry because I was like, I have been told the wrong information my entire life. I did everything opposite that what all the experts, doctors, therapists, everybody told me to do. And I got, well, ignoring their advice. and going with, some crazy internet thing that my friend told me about. And so now I'm coming up, I always say I call it a keto-versary. March will be my 10-year keto-versary.
Wow.
And, and, so it's been 10 years. Like if anyone would have told me, Mary, you will go 10 years without eating a Hershey bar or a Domino's pizza, or, like any of those things that I used to eat, I wouldn't have believed it. I couldn't fathom it because I literally was obsessed with food. And so when I started keto and started eating things that were actually like nourishing me, and then started focusing on real food, and my health turned around, my brain functioned better, all because that was the missing piece for me. All the decades of like doing programs and trying to follow all the rules to recover from an eating disorder, it didn't stick because the messaging was always everything in moderation, all foods fit, there's no bad foods. And that is just like, excuse me, a lie from the pit of hell when you are dealing with addiction. Nobody tells alcoholics and drug addicts to drink and do drugs in moderation. They literally tell them, you have to stop or you're going to die.
Yeah.
That's what they're told. And food addiction is different. It's like not even recognized by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
There's big, people that deny it even exists, and they say things like, well, you can't be addicted to something you need. Well, yes, we need food. It's true. We have to eat to live, but there's nothing that says we have to eat donuts. There's no rule that we have to eat pasta or rice or anything there's no rule that we have to eat anything that compels us to eat more. So my drug foods may not be somebody else's drug foods. That's what I call them now. Like I don't necessarily say carbohydrates because I don't subscribe to like the idea of carbohydrates in general being bad, although I have many opinions about carbs. But some people can handle them, some people can't.
Sure.
I'm one of the ones that can't handle certain carbohydrates. I do eat carbs. I always think it's funny, people like lose their mind. They think that because I am keto that I must not eat any carbs. I'm like, no, I eat carbs. I just don't eat thousands of them a day, the way I would when I was binging, in front of my TV at night. There's so it's like quantity matters, quality matters. There's all these things. So anyway, I forgot where I was going with that, but yeah, I don't see carbs as like a terrible thing. There's certain foods that I call drug foods because I am incapable of having just one or one serving of something. So the things that compel me to want to eat more or eat other things, I've just eliminated those things. And yeah. And some people will say,
can I interject and just ask, because you got a lot of information there, right? Like, but like a lot of like topics that I think people don't understand, including myself to some extent. So when I read your ebook, it was well done, by the way. And it was free. So if you're listening, go get it. It's free. The one thing I've noticed is, and you alluded to this, is that there's like a childhood trauma part of this, or there's a piece of this where the addiction is like emotionally compelled, right? So could you kind of dive into that a little bit? Because I think some people just think they're broken. And I'm just broken. I can't do this or I can't do that. And they're always having these limiting beliefs. But really, I feel like many people are just not understanding their wiring and maybe their history and how it did wire them for the present. So would you mind sharing a little bit about that in your story?
Sure. Yeah. A lot, it is very common that like, people feel broken. And I didn't have I wouldn't say I had like a super traumatic childhood, but it's just stuff that happens to people in life. And as a kid, you don't know how to deal with it. And, there doesn't always have to be like big trauma or something horrible happening to a person in order for them to become an addict. A lot of addicts come from good families, and it's just something that happens. But a lot of people they'll say, well, I'm an emotional eater. And really what that means is they're using food for something other than what it's meant for. Like imagine, like nobody said, well, nobody, I've never really heard the phrase, well, I'm an emotional drinker, or I'm an emotional I'm an emotional drug
Emotional
user.
weightlifter.
Yeah, I'm an emotional, like nobody uses like those terms, but we say like I'm an emotional eater all the time. And really what that means is that we're using food inappropriately. We're using food to fill a need that food can't fill. And so, when I work with people, and what I had to do with myself first was figure out what was I trying to get these drug foods to do for me? What did I think they were going to do for me? Why did I have such a hard time giving them up? Because we get this emotional attachment, not just to the food. We're not just like addicted to the food, we're addicted to the drama that goes with the food, like the roller coaster of on and off diets, starting something new, quitting something, like the having a little bit of success and then falling off, like it's all connected. But we have emotional attachments to food, and sometimes it's just because we've turned to it to like soothe ourselves, comfort ourselves, reward ourselves, or entertain ourselves. And other times it's connected to like relationships. Like an example that I always share in my groups is my grandmother, when I was a little girl, taught me how to make the Hershey chocolate cake from scratch. So like for my entire life, that's been my favorite cake. And I always thought it's because, well, I like Hershey, I like the taste and all that. But I lost my grandmother in 2020. And I realized when that happened that my emotional attachment to that cake, it wasn't that it tasted good. It was that I had these memories with my grandmother, and like little stuff like, my grandmother was very sweet to me. Like I always felt loved by her. And she'd push the chair up to the counter and she'd talk sweetly to me and give me the measuring cups and tell me like how to do it and tell me I was doing a good job and all those things. And so that cake was like one of the things that like I cried a lot when I was getting food sober. I cried a lot about not eating certain things, and that was one of them. And I remember like having thoughts of what is your problem, Mary? Like, why are you crying over a cake? Like, this is ridiculous. And I didn't realize it was about the relationship with my grandmother until she passed away. So, we have these ties to food that we don't think about. And so when we try to give things up for our overall health and the betterment of our life, even though and we know these things are bad for us, like in a sense, we experience grief. Like we go through the grieving process of letting it go. And that's why people, so it's like there's physical withdrawal, but there's emotional withdrawal, and people get really upset, and it's a very controversial topic, and it's such a heated discussion, like the food addiction isn't real, food addiction is real debate. And I think it's because people are so emotionally like attached to food, and when you tell them they can't have some, like there's something like snaps loose, they're like, what? I can never have that's ridiculous, that's insane, I could never live like that, I can't go my whole life without having fill in the blank, right? Like people say stuff like that, like they literally think like they can't live without a particular food.
That's that one. Thanks for sharing that about your grandmother, because I read that in your book, and I could tell she was a very positive influence in your life. And she was like, I like how you put it, like she was just kind of always put together. She always looked good no matter what the situation, right? But
Yes.
it seemed to me that like she was sending you like this subliminal message through example that like, hey, no matter what the situation, if you feel good about yourself, you just keep pushing forward, kind of, she seemed like she was very positive. But I like that you are touching on the idea of food. You're trying to make food meet a need that it's not designed to do, right?
Right.
Food is meant to nourish your body and keep you alive so that you can live life. It's
Yes.
not meant to make life feel okay, right?
Right.
Or it's not meant to make me feel worthy or okay.
Right.
So I love that you put that. Could you give us some, could you give for people who are listening and maybe this is a new concept to them, could you give us some like examples of what food addiction would look like in everyday life? Like, how would I
Mm-hmm.
know if I'm addicted to food, right? I know what alcoholism looks like. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's pretty
Mm-hmm.
obvious. They give you
Yeah.
DUIs. You know what I mean? So, uh,
Yeah.
but what are some things that people could be looking? Because I'm sure there's some people, a lot of ladies listen to this, and I want to touch on self-worth and weight in that in just a few minutes because I know that was a big part of your story as well. Um, but what are some indicators that maybe I'm struggling with this? Could you help us with that?
Yeah. So if you think about food all the time, if you are on and off a diet all the time, always trying to lose weight, um, if you eat in secret. So an example of that, like what does that look in everyday life? Like eating in the car, we're alone, and then getting rid of the evidence, all the wrappers and stuff before you go home. Or like I used to pick up, like I would pick up donuts for my family, but when I went to the donut place, I would get the dozen donuts, but then I would get like four for me for the car ride home. And then I'd walk in and be like, oh, hey, I got donuts. And then I'd eat more out of the box. Like I didn't already eat four in the car. Okay. So that's what it looks. So secret eating, hiding wrappers, lying about what you eat or don't eat, the constant like obsession with food, diet, and weight. Um, there's other things, but those are like the big, like kind of like some of the bigger signs.
Wow, I wouldn't even think to like eat in the car and then hide it like that because I mean obviously I've never dealt with that, but I can
Right.
totally see that would,
Yeah.
and I could see doing that and not realizing you're doing it too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, like I always knew I was doing it. Like I like that's one of the part of the disorder. Like, here I was 260 pounds, but I didn't like binge eat in front of people. Like you always, how to behave in front of others, and then, because you're fat, and you don't want people to see you eating. I mean, that's like a big component for a lot of people. I would also like it is just like kind of like it's odd behaviors with food or feeling like shame and guilt and regret about stuff. Like I would go to the McDonald's drive through and I would literally like hold up a piece of paper, even though like there's no camera, or at least there wasn't. I don't know if there is now, but like no one could see me when I was like at the ordering the food, but I would like have paper like I was ordering for multiple people. And then I would get two drinks because I didn't want them to like think that I was the one who was going to eat all the food, even though I was. Um,
Wow.
and so stuff like that. It's like, being deceptive. Having an eating disorder turns us into liars. It's with all addiction turns you into a liar.
Wow. That's to me that's incredible. Like it's just I can imagine if you know you're doing those things, kind of the shame and conflict you must feel when
Yeah.
eating and when being around other people. There it must be a constant tension, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you just feel ashamed and embarrassed like all the time. Like I was talk about, it wasn't that I didn't have fun in my life before recovery. I could have a good time with my family and laugh and, do things, but it was like there was always this like dark cloud over everything because I didn't feel good physically, didn't feel good about how I looked. And I had all this like guilt. And I thought for sure I was the only one who acted crazy with food. Like it's very isolating. You don't
Mhm.
realize how like disordered eating is extremely common. I think that there are more disordered. I think there are more people disordered with food than not, and I know that's a very bold statement. But if when you take into consideration the fact that 93% of the population, the last statistic that came out, I believe 93% of the population is metabolically unhealthy. I mean, a good significant amount of that it's related to food. Like people don't just become metabolically unhealthy. I mean, sure, processed foods have a lot to do with that, but what people are eating, how much they're eating, it, is connected to that. So I think it's very common. And, there's a scale. There's mild, moderate, severe. I was obviously on the severe end. An example of mildly disordered, the entirety of society. I'm going to use this example. So society has put rules on us about when to eat, right? Like we
Mhm.
literally have breakfast, lunch, and dinner times. And how do we know? Well, if you show up to a diner at 7 or 8 a.m., it's packed, everybody's there. Is everybody really hungry at that time, or are they there because it's breakfast time? Same thing with like going to a restaurant. When my family and I, if we go to Texas Roadhouse, I always want to go at 2 or 3 o'clock because we're going to get seated right away. You go at 5, forget it. You're waiting an hour. Is it because everybody that's in that restaurant at that time, like, is everybody literally hungry at that time? Or is it, oh, we've been trained, this is the time to eat. So like it as babies, when we're born, we cry if we're hungry, right? But then somewhere along the line, we are trained to eat at meal times, and it's like forced on us. And then everything in society perpetuates that. School has, it's lunchtime. Work, you get time off at noon for lunch hour. You're like, right? It's pretty standard. And that eating by the clock is not really normal. Like we should eat when we feel hungry, not because the clock dictates it. Um, Another example is like when you go on an airplane and they hand out snacks. Do you think everybody on the plane is hungry at that moment? But what does everybody do? With few exceptions, there's very few people that don't take the snacks, but most everyone takes the snacks and eats it because it was offered. Like that's a
Sure.
very mild form of being disordered.
It feels like a social obligation that I have to take it, right?
Maybe, yeah. Or like it's that, oh, it's available, it's free, it's for me,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing.
No, I
Yeah.
find that interesting because I fight with societal norms quite a bit in my content and just in life. Because I want to touch on a little bit on some of that because I really feel like um, when we allow a sick society to dictate what is normal,
Mm-hmm.
we just become just like society. I can't expect anything different, right? If 90+% of people have some form of metabolic dysfunction, which that that statistic you threw out is relatively accurate. I mean, because that's exactly what I read as well. So I'm like, if 90+% of people are in some form of metabolic dysfunction, I need to be swimming upstream, not downstream.
Yeah.
I need to be swimming
Yeah.
against the current because I mean, I'm not trying to die early. I'm not
Right.
trying to have a heart attack. Like, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
look like I'm on Wally, like
Yeah.
having to use a scooter to get around because my bones are so weak and my muscles
Yeah.
are non-existent. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a very significant. If there was an epidemic or a pandemic, that would be it. You know. So what are some thoughts from you on how to start addressing some of these issues? Like, what did you do to start addressing some? I know you got desperate. I know you kind of hit this like really low point, and I feel like for some people, pain and desperation is a serious motivator, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what would you encourage somebody if they are dealing with this? And I know you coach people now, you have a business doing this. So I know you're helping a lot of people. What do you find to be some great first steps or whatever, just to start addressing some of these concerns and issues?
Well, so most people come to me initially like in a state of diet mentality. They still think, I just gotta, I need to know what my macros are. I need, like they think that the answer lies in that. Um, but so think of how I want to start this. A key component for me that was missing in all my before age 42 and all those years leading up to that, the component that was missing for me was that I didn't know proper nutrition. Um, the nutrition guidelines that are out there pushed by the government and women's magazines and TV shows and books and all of that, like the heart healthy grains, low fat, lots of vegetables, lean meat, like a lot of it is just garbage.
I
It's
agree.
the wrong information. And so I was operating on wrong information for decades, which is why I never felt satisfied and just always struggled. So not having the education about nutrition that I needed to go along with some of, like, in the different therapists I saw and different programs I did, I always like got some kind of like nugget from, I learned something in all of these things, but I could never make anything stick because I just couldn't think clearly. I was just, I couldn't get out of from under the addiction. And so I think the first step for everybody is getting your nutrition right, getting out of that diet mentality, letting go, changing your paradigm, letting go of all the stuff that the experts say, that you got to eat very low calorie, low fat, stay away from butter, like all those things, like do the opposite of what they say is what I
So
say.
if you were going to
So
give somebody a guideline for what is nutritious food, right? I know what mine would be. What would yours be?
beef, red meat. It's the most nutritious food on the planet. And it's the most demonized and the thing that people are most afraid of. They're not afraid of Oreos and Pop Tarts and Doritos. They're afraid of red meat. And it makes me crazy. And they're afraid because they've been conditioned, like I've had so many people ask me, what does your doctor think about all the meat that you eat? I'm like, how come you never asked me what my doctor thought about all the Dairy Queen that I was eating? Like, why are you now concerned about what, the meat that I'm eating? I've lost over 100 pounds. I feel good. I don't have any like diseases of civilization that I used to have, and you're concerned about it now. Yeah, meat, eat. I encourage protein and healthy fats. Use real butter. Stay away from seed oils. Eat real food. I don't care if you want to be keto, low carb, paleo, whatever. Just eat real food. That's what matters. Stay away from processed foods. Eat a lot of nutrient dense, rich red meat. Throw in some chicken, salmon, shrimp, whatever else you like, but prioritize the red meat and, choose carbohydrates that don't trigger you to eat all the things and use healthy fats. And
I love that.
so, yeah, so I work with people on that, the nutrition component and trying to get people to eat. It's interesting because if we're eating carbs, we can be like, we have like the bottomless pit, right? We can eat tons of carbs and eat lots of food. And one of the biggest struggles that a lot of clients I have now is because what they're eating is so satiating that they end up under eating. And so just getting people to eat, because and the part of why they undereat is they do feel satiated, but the other part is they still think that, well, they're still trying to lose weight, and they think, well, to lose weight I've got to eat this very little amount of food. But I
That's
just want people to
interesting.
eat real food.
Yeah, I do the same thing with my clients. It's like, hey, I kind of like I kind of run the gamut, right? I can work with people who I come from a more bodybuilding background as well. So I'll work with people who want to do macros and just get jacked and tan. Like that's fine if that's what you want, bro.
Yeah.
You know? But then I work with a lot of people who are just they're just overweight and they're just trying to find their health and they're just trying to find a way forward. So I can do macros, but then I also do like, hey, we can just go by principle here. But I find pushing people towards nutrient density, which is just like, hey man, if 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 you can eat a bag of Doritos and still be hungry, you didn't get any nutrients out of that.
That's
But I
right.
dare you to eat an 8-ounce chicken breast with no sauce on it and tell me how you feel. Right? You're like, I am so full. My jaw hurts, right? I don't want any more food. So it's like pushing people towards real food. And then I think there's a big key too, and probably you can speak into this, is recognizing real signals for hunger, um,
Mhm.
rather than like actually I am hungry right now, or am I bored? Am I right? I think you talk about this called the HALT method,
Yes.
right? Could you
Yeah.
clarify that a little bit? I thought that was super interesting.
Sure. HALT is just a method, that I teach my clients to use, when they are considering making an eating decision that's not going to serve them well. You got to stop. Literally, HALT means stop and ask, am I really truly hungry or something else going on? Am I angry or anxious about something? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Those are like the universal, what we call danger zones. I talk to my clients about danger zones. We all have danger zones, and a danger zone is a situation where we are going to derail whatever it is that we're doing. I like, it's easy to use the word diet, but so for the sake of example, you're about to derail your diet to, because you're in this certain situation. So an example of a danger zone would be maybe going to your favorite restaurant, or it's your birthday, or you're on vacation, or you just had a fight with your spouse. Like, there's things that drive us to want to eat when we don't really need to. So HALT is just a tool to like stop and examine like what's really going on. Is food really what I need in this current situation?
Mm.
And I tell my clients, do the egg test. Like, in this situation, if you say to me, if you're saying to me, Mary, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry, and I say, here, have a boiled egg, here, have this boiled egg, and you go, no, it's not really what I want, you're not really hungry, because real hunger will take that egg. If that doesn't appeal to you and you're like, oh no, I really want something crunchy or salty, or you're having a craving, and you got to figure out what that is about, because real hunger can be solved with something as simple and boring as a boiled egg.
Yeah, that's funny. There's an old a saying that's like, hunger is the best sauce, right?
Yeah.
So it's like,
Anything will taste good when you're
if you're
hungry, right?
hungry, right? I see what the Bible says, like hunger drives the worker, right? So
Yeah.
it's like hunger actually will push you to do, like, to eat things that would normally taste horrible.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's super cool. That HALT method, I think, is a great way um, for anybody who's listening. And to put it in a different light, I think, it's really just to step back and really examine what I'm about to do. It's like
Yeah.
witnessing myself, like
Yeah.
stepping back and like looking and going, huh, I wonder, I wonder
Yeah.
what's really happening here, rather than just being driven by emotion or driven by
Yeah.
sensation or habit, right?
Yeah.
Because many
And
of us, uh, like, as soon as you get home from work, you find your head in the pantry
yeah.
and you're like, well, why? If you stop and say, well, why am I here? It's like, well, you're tired and you feel like you earned a treat because
Right.
you're tired. But in all actuality, you don't need it. So
Right.
which goal is more important right now? Satisfying
Right.
your immediate want or staying healthy for the long term? You know?
Right. It is,
So
the next step to that is like, well, okay, so if I'm not really hungry, then what's the need?
mm,
What do I have to, what is the need that I need to fill? So your example of, looking for a snack because you're tired, and that happens to a lot of people. It's been a long day. They realize, oh, I forgot to take meat out for dinner. And so then they're like, oh, let's hit the drive-through or order pizza or something, right? Our real need at that moment, if we can't make a proper eating decision, our real need at that moment is rest. So that's what we need to do rather than eat, right? We don't, when we're in that like danger zone, it's hard to like think clearly and realize we don't have to eat, because we're so trained that, well, no, you're home from work, it's dinner time, you need to eat, when really you probably need a cat nap. Or maybe, like, there's a lot of people that have way too much on their plate. Maybe you don't need to eat dinner at all and you just need to go to bed because you are lacking sleep. So it's figuring out like what's the real need and fill that need, because food can't fix tired, food can't fix lonely. It can't give us the rest and connection that we need.
I love that. I love that. Food can't fix lonely. It's so true though. But we try real hard for food to fix that kind of stuff, right?
We do. We
You
do.
know, we try real hard. We kill ourselves trying it. So I want to jump into something real quick with you. Um, You talked about in your book, you talk about weight, your weight being like this thing, right? It's like this specter. It was like always, right around the corner. And with many of my clients, especially female clients, um, weight is just this thing.
Mhm.
It's like this glass that is filled with my value
Mhm.
and my value alone. Um, and I know you lost 100 pounds, which is incredible. And I follow you on Instagram too. You're training quite a bit. You're exercising, you're showing your food, like you're kind of living the life. Could you kind of talk about what weight, like why is that such a deal? Um, and just like help us, maybe I really want some ladies to kind of get set free from this, honestly, because it's so frustrating when you
Yeah.
think about it.
The obsession with the scale is a huge part of being disordered with food. Um, and I don't, so my very first, I think I talk about this in my little ebook. My very first experience with weighing myself, like I was, my mother has like her own set of like issues with food and her weight her entire life, and she raised me, and I think I was like 7 or 8 years old, and she took me to tops, which stands for take off pounds sensibly. And it was basically a room full of ladies and like a doctor's scale, and everybody had a piece of paper that they would turn in, they wrote their food on it, and they would get weighed, very similar to like they do at the Weight Watchers meetings, where you go to the meeting and they weigh you. And that was my very first introduction to that. And then because she didn't have a babysitter or whatever, I'm sitting there in the chair, and I'm being exposed to the things that these women are saying, and just the topic of conversation being like weight and food. And that had an impact on me because I'd been with her several times, and I remember like asking, can I have a paper to like write down what I eat? And I think before that, I never, it would have been something that had never occurred to me. And then, as a teenager, I'm not blaming media, but there's definitely, it has an impact on women. When I was a teenager in the 80s, I read like Teen Magazine and 17 Magazine, and I didn't look, I've always been like more on the curvier side. And when I look back at in high school, when I was so worried about my weight and became bulimic over it, I always thought I was bigger than all my friends, but I wasn't. Like I could look at picture. I was just showing my son a picture the other day, and it was a picture of me and my girlfriend, and we're like the same size. I was just a little more top heavy than her, and that always made me feel like bigger than I was. And so I wasn't like stick thin. I didn't look like the girls in the magazines. And um, that's what was like talked about. And I think it's just something, women, it's a conversation that women gravitate towards. Like even now, when I run into people, even though I desperately want to talk about other things with people, it always comes back to this conversation. Now it's because they're asking me questions, and they're spilling their guts and stuff like that. But there seems to be like that is just a of like in the top three conversations people have or women have, weight and how our bodies look is one of them. So getting the scale out of your life is very challenging. Here I'm going on 10 years recovery, and I only let it go a year ago. Like I have not stepped on my personal bathroom scale for 15 months because it just doesn't matter to me anymore. Like I feel good, my clothes fit. Um, that's all I care about. Like it's so we get into the trap so much. People, I see people agonize over like 5 pounds. In the big picture, what difference is five? Like I can tell you right now, 5 pounds. If I lost 5 pounds, it's not going to make a darn bit of difference in the way my clothes fit or look. It literally means nothing. Um, and obviously, it's at a certain weight for people, people that get obese and morbidly obese, it matters. But as far as like what our value and what makes us worthy of having a good life, weight has nothing to do with it. But that was definitely a hard part of the addiction for me to break. But I just got tired of when I finally realized that it really doesn't matter, that what matters is how I feel.
That's great. I try really hard, like especially with my female clients, to get them to think about the scale logically. Like, hey, let's think about this. You're a 5'8" woman, right? You're as tall as some men, right? So
Yeah.
like you have to have weight, bones,
Yeah.
and muscle mass to be that tall. So you're not going to weigh 120 pounds.
Yeah.
You're just not. It's not possible. You would be anorexic if we got you
Yeah.
down to that. So
those weight charts that they put out there are very unrealistic. In my journey, when I was still weighing myself, at my smallest point, I got down to 153 pounds, and I was wearing a size 2, and I still thought I needed to lose 20 pounds. I was like, where was it going to come from back then? Like there was no more to lose. But that's, that body dysmorphia, that's a whole nother topic. But, we just, society, I think we're just like so messed up to the point where like you see it on social media, like obviously, and it happens even in this space, that I'm in, where, we're trying to have people realize that like it's our health that matters, not so much our looks. It's still like I'm inundated with women with abs in my feed every day.
It's so true, man. It's so true. Like I try to explain to people, like, you cannot look at social media and start making goals based off of it, because the
Yeah.
algorithm it's literally optimizing for like the top 1%, which chances are you ain't it, right? Unless you picked your parents well and you have no other job. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get paid to look great,
Yeah.
right? With those genetics that you didn't earn,
Yeah.
right? It's just it is literally just a negative feedback loop to get on Instagram. And look, I'm from the genetic point of view, I did pretty good. My parents were great, right? So for a 47-year-old man, I look pretty good. And I get on there and I'm like, I'm a scrub compared to some of these people. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? I just
Yeah.
feel, if I tried to compare myself to Chris Bumstead, like 5-time Mr. Olympia, right? And he's on there with like his chiseled look and mustache, that Tom Selleck mustache. I'm just like, I'm a pile of poop compared to this guy, right?
Yeah.
So you can't do it. Like it has to be. I feel like people's vision for their health and their goal has to be, one, realistic within your own context. And that takes a lot of getting to know yourself and
Yeah.
being okay with the body that God gave you, right? I mean, some of us just look the way we look, and there's not a lot you
Yeah.
can do, but you can work really hard to optimize the body that you do have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important. I think that, health matters a lot. I think I think it should be the number one thing. And obviously, everybody wants to look good. I mean, like, that's why we wear the things that we wear, or use the skincare or makeup that we wear, or have the haircut that we have. Like, we all want to look good, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think, I know men struggle with it too, but I think that with women, that there's just been like this like standard set in society that you have to like look a certain way, and obviously like that trend changes, like throughout the generations. Like, well, here's the way that if you look at, if you're good if you look this way, and now we're like in the Kim Kardashian
Yeah.
era.
It
where
used to
everybody
be like
wants like a
rail
19
thin.
inch waist and a yeah,
It used to be rail thin, and then it was like
yes,
busty chicks, and now it's like
yeah,
everybody needs a dump truck of a
yeah,
behind. You know what I mean? It's like
yes,
nobody can keep up, like
yeah, yeah. So it's like
genetically
all
I'm
this
in or I'm
changing,
not,
and no matter what it is, we're not good enough.
Yeah, I
Not
know,
good enough.
right? I'm like, geez, we just can't win. That's why we can't let the world or the we can't let the world decide what our value is, right? And
Right,
like even with the scale, especially for ladies, your relationship to gravity does not determine your worth. It just
right.
doesn't, right? It's just like I was talking with a couple clients before, like before we even started, and was just like, hey, let's just focus on the habit of health. Let's focus on, you know, building the foundation of I'm getting healthy, I'm becoming healthy, I am healthy, right? And we're doing all those things that healthy people do, and then the form will follow that, right? Your body will start to respond to you. But if you're stressing out about the weight every day and you're stressing out about whether this food is going to be okay or that food's okay, then you're literally just manufacturing stress, which is going to cause weight, water retention and all these other things because you're
Yeah,
trying to deal with this stuff when it's not even necessary, you know?
yeah.
So I
I
just find
think
that
this.
super interesting.
Yeah, I think the scale definitely causes people stress. And so, I recommend like at least for a period of time, like experimenting, like putting the scale away. I've had people, that I've worked with, like literally text me and be like, "Oh, the scale is up 0.3," and I'm like, "0.3, like this is nothing." Like, but you don't want to like invalidate them, but like 0.3 in the big, this is nothing. That's like a normal, you know, fluctuation. So if you're someone that like the scale makes or breaks your day, you need a break from it. Like, if you step on it and you have high expectations and then it gives you a number that you are dissatisfied with, and then the rest of the day you're like bummed, and then you punish yourself by like denying yourself the food that your body needs that day because the scale didn't say what it was supposed to. Or the flip side of that, if you get on and I'm down 3 pounds and now you're on cloud nine and everything's great, it's a good day. Like, you are giving the scale power that it doesn't deserve. Like, the scale should not tell us what kind of day we're going to have.
I totally agree with you. Like I call that the negative feedback loop, like where you start the day off bummed, because you got on the
Mm-hmm.
scale, right?
Yeah.
You went to the scale, it didn't say you were thin today, you
Yeah.
know, and then
Yeah.
now the whole day is shot rather
Yeah.
than saying, hey, like, no, leave that alone. Let's, I went and worked out. Boom. I won today. Hey, I made some good choices on my meals. Boom. I won today. Right. So it's
Yeah.
having these small wins and building momentum and worrying less about the objective measurement of success,
Yeah.
which is like we think is the scale. So I find that super empowering. And a lot of times people don't realize too, ladies, especially when you start lifting weights, muscle weighs more than fat. So you literally could be dropping fat and staying exactly the same weight, right? I actually had a client. She worked for me for 6 months. Okay. She did not drop 1 pound, not 1 pound. She was 145
So she
pounds.
recomped, right?
Oh my God. She looked like a different person. She was like, the scale's not moving. She's like so discouraged. So I sent her
Yeah.
both of her progress pictures from like day one and then month
Yeah.
6. And literally she was a completely different person. Like
Yeah.
she went from like mom, stressed, pregnant belly to like having abs. But she was
But
so
she
fixated.
she couldn't see that because the scale said, "Oh, you're still the same weight."
You're
Yeah.
still overweight, is what the scale was saying in her mind. But I'm
Yeah.
like, darling,
Yeah.
look at you. Like you literally are a completely different person.
Yeah.
So obviously the number you're reading there, it's misinformation. That has
Yeah.
nothing to do with what's happening right now. So I find that super empowering that you said that because I see you working out. Um, I see, you're going to the gym, you're going for walks. What does your normal day look like now to maintain this healthy habit of staying food sober, as you put it, and
Mhm.
optimizing your day so that you continue to progress forward.
So, I mean, I just have a routine. I've prioritized, it's a priority. My number one priority every day is remaining food sober. And it's not I say that, but I want to like preface that with it's not a battle for me to stay food sober anymore because I've worked on a lot of issues. I do definitely still hear from what I call the voice of sabotage. Like we all have that voice of sabotage. I was going to say, about the scale, like when we step on it and it doesn't say what we want, that voice in our head is like, this isn't even working. You may as well have ice cream today, right? Like it's that voice that like wants to send us back to food for the solution for everything. So I've learned how to combat that voice and shut it down. And so I don't have like this big battle staying food sober, but it still remains my number one priority for the day. And I just have a routine and I just know what my boundaries are and what I will eat or won't eat. So typically I'm up like at 4 a.m. Not because I necessarily want to be, but because in my old age, it's just I only need 6 hours apparently,
You're
six to
not
seven
old.
hours.
Don't say that. Don't say
I'm
that because
joking. I
I'm
definitely
only like
I
3 or 4 years behind you, so we're not old yet,
oh
Mary.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I don't feel like it's funny, like when you're younger, like my dad passed away when he was 52. And I was, in my 20s, and I always, you see your parents and we see that as older. And I realize now I'm like, dang, he was really young. It's anyway. So I just have a routine, and I just do what I do. Like I like earlier, I prioritize beef. Um, I get up early and I have a coffee because I love coffee,
Mhm.
and then I work out, and then I come home and I eat protein after my workout, and I work with clients most days. Do something work related? I work at home. And I also do things like I do the infrared sauna and I do little hit cardio in there a few days a week, 3 or 4 days a week. I go on walks very inconsistently. It's one thing I wish I was better about. I don't know why that is one of my battles, is like making myself get out and walk. In my defense, I live in Texas, so it's hard to like walk in the summertime. Nobody wants to walk when it's 100 degrees. But it's cooler weather now, so I should get out there. But yeah, I mean, my routine, I just have a routine. I'm consistent and it's simple. I don't, I don't like things to be complicated, and I don't want to feel overwhelmed. And, some people might look and say, oh, that my food is boring, which for me, I mean, it kind of needs to be like if I get into a space where like food is too exciting, that's a danger zone. Like my brain lights up, and then you start thinking about food in ways that we don't need to think about.
Mhm.
So I just keep it simple: beef, chicken breast with the skin on. um I do, I like to make mashed cauliflower. um Not a real big veg eater, but like I'll do, I'll make taco bowls, things like that. I just keep it
Nice.
simple. It's mostly protein.
Yeah, I find people say too that like, oh, your food is boring. But I like to say, well,
Yeah.
let's look at the words you're using. You're using
Yeah.
words of entertainment. So you're
Yes.
thinking of food as entertainment.
Yeah, and
I'm
it's
not
not.
trying to have a great time while I eat. I'm trying to be
Right.
healthy, right?
Right.
I'm trying to get jacked. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, but society has made food a social thing, right? Like, so we view food as fun, but really, like, so when I do things with groups of people now, like when I go out to eat with friends and stuff, I am focused on, in the past, it would be like, ooh, what restaurant are we going to? Ooh, what am I going to have? Which dessert am I going to order? Like, it was all about the food. And we're kind of like trained to do that. And so then we associate the good time that we have eating out with people with that it's because of the food, but it's not. It's because of who we're with, right? So when I go do things where like I'm eating out with someone, I try to focus on who am I with? What can we talk about? That's where the fun is derived, not like from what I'm eating. So I like to tell people, I hope that your food is boring and your life is interesting.
That's beautiful. I actually really like that. Well, because if your food is boring, then you're there for the company. You know what I
Right.
mean? So, well, Mary, look, you've been awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people reach you? And like, where can we find out more information about you? And I'd like to know, do you have any kind of projects or anything you're working on right now? Or if not, no big deal. But, you
Yeah.
know, like,
um,
just tell us, where can we reach you?
so you can find me on Instagram or Facebook, Instagram and Facebook at Keto Mary 71. And my website is foodfreedomwithmary.com. And the project I'm actually working on a food freedom membership program. Um, I've done groups, like I've done groups in the past, lots of groups, successful groups, and always like it's been on Facebook, but like for a limited period of time. But I'm working on having like an ongoing thing for people, a place where they can meet with other recovering food addicts and recovering people recovering from eating disorders, and just have a safe place to, discuss all the challenges that go along with that.
That's really awesome because I really feel like you're saying this, there's a battle going on like in the health space where you've got people who are kind of like totally into the science space where like only controlled trials matter, and then like food addiction isn't a thing. And then you've got people who are actually working with clients and dealing with real life stuff and saying, no, actually, this kind of stuff actually happens. And we can't just relegate people to a randomized control study. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I really
Well, and
appreciate the fact that you're
that's
doing
where
that.
that's where it comes in, where when people feel broken, when someone says, "Oh, I'm having this issue, I can't stop, I feel obsessed," and then someone tells them, "Well, that's not even real." Like, how do you not feel broken when they like your affliction is being denied, right? Like, oh, well, obviously I'm broken because this expert says this isn't even a thing.
That's so true too, right? So it definitely, there's a lot of self-discovery that goes into this. And then what I like to share with people is like you need to have a real spirit of curiosity with all of this kind of
Yeah.
stuff where you start learning for yourself, not just listening to whatever
Right.
person has the loudest voice at the time, right? There
Right.
really has to be one thing that social media has really done, and we're going to end here in just a second. One of the things that social media has really done, it's taking away people's ability to think critically. And
Yes.
because we consume information now in 30-second bites,
Yeah.
and we act like we got the full story, when the majority of people who can actually articulate something in 30 seconds have spent decades getting good at that thing and learning
Yeah.
about it and doing well, like studying. So I really feel like people, if you're struggling with any type of health issue, you need to have a spirit of curiosity. Put on your white belt like you're a learner, and let's just, you got to start. Because if you don't, you're going to be trusting people who may or may not be right for you. So it's like,
Yeah.
also finding those voices that resonate with you and sticking with them. Don't keep introducing a bunch of new voices because then it gets confusing. And, I've got
Yeah.
people messaging me like,
Information
hey,
overload.
they're like, hey, I saw you had this on your plate. Is that good for you? And I'm like, well, where did you hear that it wasn't? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, this guy's saying this food kills you, and this guy's saying you should take shots of olive oil. I'm like, yeah, okay. So, it just gets crazy. So, but Mary,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. And
For having me.
we're definitely going to put your links and stuff in the show notes. And we really
Okay.
hope to get to chat again soon. Okay.
All right. Great. Thanks so
All
much.
right.